Okay, so Billy, there are these huge protests that are happening on college campuses around the world, but they started in the US. Where does this story of protesting begin?
So the protests are over the Israel and Hamas war. And I think whenever we talk about the war in Gaza, it's important to give some brief context to start. So on October 7, Hamas launched an attack on Israel. And according to data cited by the UN, roughly 1,200 people were killed. Hamas, which Australia lists as a terrorist organisation, captured about 240 hostages, and today about 133 remain captive. Now, Israel responded by declaring war and bombarding Gaza. And according to data cited by the UN, at least 34,000 Palestinians have now been killed since that date of the 7th of October. And Israel's war in Gaza has caused a massive humanitarian crisis there. And in the 7 months since the war began, there have been mass protests all over the world. There have been protests at universities, there have been protests on the streets, they have really been everywhere. But this recent wave of student protests began at Columbia University in New York City in mid-April, so more than 2 weeks ago now. Okay,
so Columbia is where this story begins. It's one of the most prestigious universities in New York. Barack Obama is one of the alumni of that college. What's happened there?
Yeah, if you haven't heard of Columbia University, you have definitely heard of many of its graduates. It's a very prestigious university over there. So what's happened now? So on the 18th of April, more than 100 students were arrested after they refused to vacate an encampment on the campus.
Can I just stop you there? Encampment, that word's been everywhere in the headlines. What does it actually mean?
Basically, it is just a group of tents that students are setting up on university lawns, and they are sleeping there. So they have been sleeping there for more than 2 weeks now. So students at Columbia University, for example, have been sleeping on the lawns of their uni for more than 2 weeks now.
So these encampments were set up on the 18th of April at Columbia University. It's now the 3rd of May. What's happened between then and now?
Yeah, the protests have really only intensified since then. It's been a massive story this week. It's been the leading story of the New York Times. So this week, students forcefully occupied one of the halls on campus, the Hamilton Hall, which is actually a really well-known hall for several protests that have happened there over centuries. And it was completely vandalized and blockaded, and the uni put out a statement saying that, well, they said that they had no choice but to reach out to the police. And that is when riot police were actually brought in to clear the building, and they arrested dozens of people in the process of that happening and it being cleared out.
It was pretty remarkable vision. It was being live streamed kind of by most news outlets, and it was police wearing like full gear in these huge trucks coming face to face with student protesters. It was quite remarkable vision.
And the uni has also released a statement saying that students who were part of that will possibly face expulsion. So tensions are very high, I think, is probably an understatement, to be honest. And Joe Biden, the US president, also weighed in. A spokesperson for him said that forcibly taking over a building on campus is absolutely the wrong approach.
And so in this instance, these protesters were met by police, specifically the NYPD. There's been quite a lot of discussion around what that interaction between police and protesters looked like. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so there has been this conversation of police violence, and there have been several reported incidents of police violence that have come from students who have been at the protests. Some of the organisers in Columbia, for example, they said that multiple students were injured by police and had to be taken to hospital. They also said that some students had emerged with swollen faces from being kicked repeatedly and also from getting tackled to the ground. So some really concerning incidents there. So those are some of the reports that we've heard about police violence, but in this case, we haven't heard directly from the New York Police Department or from universities verifying the situation from their perspective.
Hello, I'm James and I produced the video you're watching. If you're enjoying what you're watching, we'd love it if you considered subscribing and checking us out on our other platforms. It'd really help in getting the word out about what we're doing here at TDA. Thanks very much, and now back to the deep dive.
It's not just Colombia, though, where this has happened. It's happened across the country and now, in fact, across the world. How has this grown, this movement?
Yeah, it's grown massively. I mean, students are now protesting at around 50 other university campuses in the US and also in Canada. Some of the universities include Harvard. I'm sure many listeners are familiar with that one, Yale and Johns Hopkins as well. And CNN reports that more than 1,000 students have now been arrested across the US in at least 21 states. So this has spread a lot across the country. These aren't just the usual protests that we often see. They are literally camping on the lawns and sleeping there. And the students have been extremely clear that they are saying they will not end, this will not stop until their demands are met. Here is one student from Colombia speaking to the media earlier this week.
We will not be moved by these intimidation tactics. You can see outside you now that the students are mobilized. There's hundreds of them here today. They will not be moved. We demand divestment. We will not be moved unless by force.
I want to get into what exactly the demands of these protesters are, because you've just said that they don't plan to leave, or they will try not to leave until those demands are met. But can we actually talk about what it is they are pushing for here?
Yeah, so as you heard in that clip, what they are asking for is divestment.
What does that mean?
So they are wanting their universities to divest from, which just means stop investing funds in companies that are linked to Israel. Now, like I mentioned, there are 50 different unis facing these demands from these students, so I'm not going to go into the responses from every single one of those 50 universities. But we've been talking about Columbia University a lot because that's where it started. It has said that it will not divest from Israel, but it did say that it will expedite a review into the matter. So they're saying that they'll look into it, but they're absolutely not making any promises. But one example of a university that has reached an agreement with the students is at Brown University, and they have reached a pretty rare agreement with the protesters. They announced that its leaders have agreed to discuss, and they then later will vote on whether or not to divest funds from companies connected to Israel. And as a result of that agreement, the protesters have stopped their encampment on their campus.
And I think just good to note that there isn't this one body that is organising all of these different encampments. They are all slightly varied. They're being organised locally on campuses. So while the demands are broadly the same, there are a few variations between them. I do want to turn now to some incidents of anti-Semitism that have occurred on college campuses. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, there have been many reports of anti-Semitism occurring during these protests. Video showed Jewish students being physically prevented from entering their colleges, and there have been some incidents of assaults on Jewish students as well. And many Jewish students have said that they don't feel safe at their university going to their classes anymore. Columbia University has strongly condemned, quote, chants, signs, taunts, and social media posts from our own students that mock and threaten to kill Jewish people. And it said that many Jewish students have left campus, and that is a tragedy. And they have also banned a student from campus due to their anti-Semitic behaviour.
As we've said, it's now not just in the US that we're seeing these protests. It's also happening here in Australia, right?
Yeah, there are now similar encampments happening here in Australia. There are ones at the University of Melbourne, University of Queensland, also ANU in Canberra. They're also at Sydney Uni. We had a colleague who was there yesterday, and she sent through photos of the camps being set up there. So again, it's spreading all across Australia now. And the organisers here in Australia are asking for a similar demand to those in the US. They are asking for the universities to stop their partnership with Israeli institutions. And another thing to mention is that Macquarie University is, quote, working to wholly understand what happened when one of its academics ran an event at the USyd protests for young children, where they were filmed chanting phrases including intifada and Israel is a terrorist state.
Look, it's a really complicated topic, and I know that it's one that affects a lot of our listeners. A lot of university-age students listening to this podcast. So hopefully we have been able to unpack a bit about where this movement has started, where it might be going next. But that's it from us today. Thanks for listening to the Daily Aus. We'll be back again on Monday, but until then, have a great weekend.